Hello, 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 hello. Testing, testing. Hello, 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 hello. Testing, testing. Okay, so today I'm working on drawing fundamentals, how to draw the human body, the human face. So recently I was doing this painting, trying to get back into regular painting, and it was taking me a while to get things right, and I realized that something that was holding me back was my drawing ability. So I pretty much always go for this kind of realistic style render, but I want to get to something a bit more stylistic and simplified, and I always struggle to do that. So I think the solution that I found was to let the drawing do most of the work in terms of the stylization and the simplification, and then if the drawing is working well, then I'll be able to get away with a simplified render and not feel like I have to do such a realistic style for it to work. So the person who inspired me this is the artist that inspired me, and I just recently saw this drawing that they posted, and this is kind of what I'm talking about when I mean I want to do something a bit more simplified and let the drawing do most of the work. So like if I was able to draw like this, then I wouldn't feel like I had to do such a realistic render for it to look good. So I want to get closer to this kind of level and let my drawing do more of the heavy lifting. So I did a sketch for this painting. It's hard to see. So you can kind of see it here, but it was basically just a drawing or a sketch for the painting to work so that I could actually start painting. It doesn't really describe any of the forms or what's happening. So I want to get my drawing fidelity to a bit more of a higher standard, and so that it's explaining the shadows and the forms in the drawing itself, so that when I get to rendering in color and shadows, then I don't have to do as much. So I'm going to close this, and we're learning from Michael Hampton, So I've got his book, Figure Drawing Design and Invention, on the side here, and I'm just going to try and go through some of the lessons and the fundamentals, try to apply it in Photoshop, review some mistakes that I'm making, and then try to apply it using some real photos of people. And we'll see how far we can get through this book. I've got a cinnamon donut with some yogurt. This is going to be feeding my brain while I do this hard work. I've got decaf honey tea, black tea. So I've got something to sip on. And we'll just go through it. I'll do a lot of reading just of the book, trying to learn concepts, and I might take some notes as well. And then I'll start drawing. So this probably isn't going to be very interesting. I'm just basically doing a practice I would normally do, but I'm streaming it. So it's probably not going to be very entertaining, but I want to get used to streaming a bit more, so it is what it is. And hopefully someone finds this useful or interesting. Just gotta double check that I'm recording. Yeah. Okay. The approach covered here is primarily concerned with the use of line, development of form, and simplified design of anatomy, the basics of being able to convincingly invent a figure that exists in space. While contour, shading, and expression are important elements in this process, they are not at the forefront of this particular method. So I had a brief skim through this book, and it seems pretty comprehensive over everything that I'm going to need to learn the human body, all in one book. And Michael Hampton's done a really good job of putting a ton of info and simplifying it into his own frameworks. So I think this is probably the ideal source to study from for this particular thing. So he says here that gesture could be the same thing that an armature is to a sculpture, or that a rig may be to a developed 3D animation or model. So he's basically saying this is the skeleton, the gesture is the skeleton of the human body, and everything else that we build on top of it is going to come from this base. So it's really the most fundamental stage, and that's why he's starting off here. And he's explaining it in a very practical way. 8 parts of the body. When developing a gesture drawing, it's important to be aware that you're describing the 8 parts of the body. These 8 parts include head, spine, arms, pelvis, rib cage, and the legs. Okay, so that's the first big part, piece of information that we need to understand. So when conveying gesture, you need to convey these 8 different parts, these 8 distinct parts, in a way to exaggerate whatever feeling or emotion that you're going for. Spine, rib cage, pelvis, arms, legs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the spine 8. Head, rib cage, pelvis, spine, arms, legs, arms. Okay. These 8 parts include a sense of story and composition. Every person has a specific way of holding himself or herself when moving. By exaggerating the story, you give your viewer a compelling image to experience. This involves developing your figure's proportions and giving your figure a sense of balance and weight. The most important thing to keep in mind while drawing the figure is that the human form is essentially a balancing act. The pelvis moves opposite to the tilt of the ribcage, and the legs stabilize the body in the shape of a large S. I want to reduce the size of this window. Okay, so he said the body is essentially a big balancing act. Table's moving quite a bit when I draw, which is annoying. So the pelvis and the ribcage move opposite each other, and they balance like stones. So here we have the pelvis down here, sorry, and the ribcage, and then we have the spine front of the torso, and the neck comes forward like this. If I make this smaller, then I can also attach the head, which is essentially a sphere with a box attached at the front. The neck goes diagonal forward, and then the legs balance like an S shape, so they connect pretty much from the middle of this egg shape forward, and then backward. You can make that a little bit smaller. Oops. And actually it needs to go back a bit more. So the back of the leg should kind of reach the back of the pelvis. So let's just redo that. And the knee is pretty much directly below here. So let's just do it as an X like he has in the book. Comes down to the X, hits the back of the pelvis, and then touches the ground. So I guess you can kind of think of it like a bunch of stones balanced on each other. They're all in line with each other. This is balanced like this, and then balanced like this. You have the heel adding support, and the rest of the foot goes in line with the rest of the body. And I can probably put the heel all the way out here. So this is what he means by it's a balancing act. All of these different parts balance within this small area. Balancing act. Okay. Let's get rid of that. So I feel like it's important to write things down for you to remember, even if you're not going to like keep it as notes to look back on. Writing it down kind of confirms with yourself what you're actually understanding about the information that you're reading. So even just writing it down one time, I think will help a lot in retaining information. And it's the same for drawing. So if I see something in this book that I think is important and that I need to remember, it's not good enough just to look at it and think that I'm remembering the information that I'm reading. I need to put it down on paper. It's kind of similar to the way that when you read some theory and you need to write it down in your own words to see what you're actually retaining. It's the same with drawing. So if I see a drawing in here, I can draw it in here and see which part of my mental model is wrong, and then I can look back at the actual book and see if I need to adjust something. And in this way I can visually adjust my mental model of the theories that I'm reading. How do I get out chat? Restream chat. Chat, pop-out player. It's not helping. Chat. So I don't want streaming to become a distraction for what I'm learning, so hopefully I can just get things set up in the first few streams and then I won't have to think about it too much. I have figured out how to put YouTube live chat on the side, but I don't know how to do that with Twitch. So that's fine for now. If someone knows, hopefully they can tell me. So he's saying in the book, in order to keep this natural quality of balance in our gesture drawings, the way that we use line, we need to find asymmetry in it so that it feels like balance and movement rather than rigid structures. So that basically just means letting lines lead into each other rather than get stuck like this. And all those things that he's saying are general principles, so I'm sure that there are going to be exceptions to the rule, but it's important to understand these fundamentals. So he's just saying that he uses C curves and S curves in different ways in different drawings to communicate an exaggerated activity. And these are just some examples of how he changes things up. So it seems like he mostly uses circles, S curves, and C curves. Rarely uses straight lines in his gesture. Okay, so he's talking about wrapping lines going around a form, for example, the curves that you see going around this cylinder of the arm. This is basically a short form way of showing perspective and form in a simplified drawing. And it's really important that these lines are consistent with the perspective that you're trying to convey. And he also says never use straight lines when you're doing this in general, just because we want to be either informing the viewer that this thing that we're wrapping is either receding or coming forward in space. And straight lines are kind of neither, just somewhere in the middle, which in general is just a bit boring. So it seems like when it's receding, it's helpful to draw this arrow down the middle. And whichever way the form is going, it should be going towards this arrow. So if this arrow is pointing down, the curves should be pointing down as well. And if I do it in perspective, this form is receding. So to make it consistent, these curves also need to be pointing in the direction that the form is going. And the opposite is true. If this form is coming towards us, okay, I did that wrong. Oops. Okay, I think I did that wrong as well. What am I not understanding here? Okay. Okay, so if the form is going this way, wrapping lines also go towards the arrow. So in this example, we can see the bottom. It's going away from us. And the wrapping lines are also going away from us. So he says in this drawing here that on the two different legs, he intentionally adds wrapping lines in the opposite direction to each leg to inform the viewer that these two forms are moving in opposite directions, therefore creating a sense of movement and balance. So he's basically saying that the spine is an S-curve comprised of three main parts: the cervical, thoracic, and the lumbar. And these all link with each other in opposing directions. And they should also be thought of as cylinders with dimensionality. So the cervical connects to the head. Then we have the thoracic. Moves in the opposing direction. I guess you can kind of think of it like the humpback. And then the lumbar, which is what supports the lower spine. So the cervical part we can kind of think of as the neck. The thoracic as the rib cage. Or the torso, and then the lumbar connecting to the pelvis. And it looks like he basically has the torso taking up the entire thoracic area, but when it gets to the pelvis, the lumbar kind of sits in open space and then connects to the pelvis a bit further down below. So there's this kind of dead space in this section, and then the pelvis is down here. And he draws it both as organic shapes as well as squares. Okay, my music stopped. Okay, so this is the head, represented as a box. Connecting to that is the thoracic, the cervical. Connecting to that is the rib cage and the thoracic. And the rib cage has this really weird tilt. So I guess you can kind of think of it as leaning forward. So when you draw it as a box, it should also have that forward tilt. This is the thoracic. And then we have a bit of dead space where the lumbar comes in, connects to the pelvis. And the pelvis has an opposing tilt to the ribcage, so it goes back, tilts backwards in space. So this is that same idea that we had earlier with the balancing stones. The ribcage goes forward and the pelvis goes backward. Here we have the neck, the cervical, the thoracic, the lumbar connecting to the pelvis. So he draws the pelvis in a few different ways. He does one as a box. one is a rounded box. And then one as kind of like a cylinder shape. So he's kind of saying that pelvis is all of these. It can be described with all of these, depending on how you look at it. So I guess that's helpful in understanding the form of the pelvis. It's really annoying because these Apple earbuds don't fit in my ears perfectly, so every now and then I'll have to like push them back in. I got them originally so that I could stream without having to wear headphones for long hours. So maybe I can get like some ear covers, earbuds, so that they fit better in my ears. So he has this model of the head, the ribcage and pelvis as cylinders as well. The head is kind of always just this circle shape with a box attached to the front. The neck always a cylinder. And then he's shown the ribcage also as a cylindrical shape, which is different from the egg shape that we're usually shown. But he's basically saying that it can be useful to see it as a cylinder as well, or that can just be another way of simplifying it. So again, this ribcage has a forward tilt. And opposing that is the pelvis, which has a backwards tilt. And it's also useful to show the under part of the chin or jaw so that it has a bit of three-dimensionality. So I think after going through all of that, it might be helpful to find some reference photos of people and just try to find those shapes within their pose. So I think I should have some reference photos somewhere that I can use. I think I should have some on this website. Should also figure out a way to add a stream overlay in case I need to hide my screen. Because I don't know how to do that yet. I'm just trying to log into this website. So it looks like I'm logged on, but apparently not on the right account. Okay, I'm gonna have to hide that. Okie dokie. Okay. I've got this T-pose reference. Let me just share my screen again. So I'm just gonna pick some of these and then try to overlay. So, let me just reduce the opacity on that one. I've got the bowl shape of the head. Oh, come on. The box that's attached to it, which is the jaw. Maybe I'll just simplify it like this. We've got the rib cage, which is basically an egg shape. And where does it come down? I think it comes around here. So this is my idea of where the rib cage is just about, I think. Looks like you can see the top of the rib cage. Sorry, the bottom of the rib cage coming up there. So maybe I've drawn it a little bit too big. Then we have the pelvis, which is kind of like an egg that's on its side. And maybe 2/3 of the size of the rib cage. Let's see if I can draw it. That'll do. So we have the cervical and the thoracic in the back. And then the lumbar support. So I'm just going to hide that. Delete this, and then we'll redraw it. So the head, the jaw, the cervical, the rib cage, maybe a bit bigger than that. That'll do. Show the front of the form. It's curved. pelvis down here. And the pelvis is pretty flat actually. Not that much curvature. And then we have cervical, thoracic, the spine, and lumbar. We have head, rib cage, pelvis. So in terms of proportion, I mean, I think my one is accurate, but in this specific case, for this specific model, hers is quite squished in, because she's quite short. And it looks like I have room to bring up the pelvis a bit and down on the rib cage. So actually, there's not a ton of space in between the ribcage and the pelvis, which makes sense because that would just make the body less stable. But there's enough space in between just to allow for movement. So I guess, how would I remember that? It's kind of like a bow tie. And it's kind of a similar space between the jaw and the ribcage that it is to the ribcage and the pelvis. So let's just delete that and we'll get up another pose. Let's get a side view. So we can see what Hampton was talking about in these opposing tilts, as well as in the spine curvature. So we have 1, 2, 3, and it's kind of like this sausage shape. So I just need to go back. New layer. Where exactly does the ribcage stop? I think it's stopping around here, so I can see this is the ribcage. I think it's stopping around here. And I guess it stops at the collarbone as well, on the top end. And then the pelvis goes down to the pubic bone. And then where does it come up to? About there. Maybe a bit higher. Kind of the top of the buttocks, I guess. And again, we have this small bow tie shape in between. And it's roughly proportional to the space between the chin and the collarbone. So let's just do an overlay again. Got the circle of the head, the box of the jaw, and just for later, the nose protrudes out like that, and then we have a circle for the mouth. Then we have the rib cage, which starts from the top of the collarbone, because I think the collarbone is part of the rib cage. And then we have the rib cage itself. Then the pelvis, which comes near the top of the butt, down to the pubic bone. And the ribcage has this forward tilt. And pelvis has this backwards tilt. Then we have the cervical, the spine, the thoracic, and the lumbar. So the lumbar seems to connect the rib cage and the pelvis together. The thoracic, the cervical connects the head and the rib cage together. And the thoracic just supports the rib cage. So we have these asymmetrical lines that Hampton was talking about, which creates this flow of the body. And just gonna hide this. So let's do it again. So basically the reason that we're doing it again is just to see what information we've retained, see if there's any mistakes in the mental model that we've made in our brain, and it gives us a chance to review them and adjust if needed. So we've got the head, box of the jaw. I think it's useful just to draw this space in between. So that's between the jaw and the collarbone. Then I have the top of the rib cage. And then I can draw this forward tilt. So that's the rib cage. And then roughly proportional to this space, we have the top of the pelvis, which has this backwards tilt. That looks alright to me. So we have these arrows. That way and this way. And we have the connectors, the spine, cervical, thoracic, and lumbar of the front of the torso. And looks like the biggest part that's off here is just the head. And we've also got the nose, which we can add in, as well as a circle for the mouth. So that's our model of this person. And the body, see how it lines up with the actual model. And pretty good. So I just did that from imagination. So this is why it's helpful to draw it without the picture, and even after you just finish reading the theory, in order to test how much of the information we actually retained and if there's anything that needs adjustment. So I can see here, let's try and line this up. This top of the rib cage is a little bit high, or this part that's sticking out, not by much. So how much of that is actually, so it's about a quarter. If you cut this in half and half again, well, it's not exactly half, thirds. Then this front part takes up 2/3 of half of the body. Yeah, I'm just gonna take a little break. It's been 1 hour and 10 minutes, and then I'll come back and we'll keep going. I got another donut and some more tea. I feel like it's actually really helpful to have some sweets or something to snack on while you're studying. Just makes sure that you have energy to keep going. Okay, so let's get a 3/4 view. This one should do. Actually, let me get a different model. Oops. Okay, so this one's 3/4 from the back. It's a bit harder to see what's going on. Oops. Looks like showing nudity got me suspended on Twitch. Hopefully YouTube's still streaming. And while I'm on this, I'm just going to change the title of my YouTube stream. Oops. Learning drawing fundamentals of the human body. Boom. Okay. Where's my book gone? What Just bring it back up again. Okay, we're about here. We're just drawing the pelvis and the ribcage in different angles. So we've got the circle of the head. We can't see the jaw right now, but we can imagine it to be here. We've got the ribcage from the, what's it called, the clavicle, roughly in line with the shoulders. In the forward tilt. And then if I divide this in half, and then 2/3, it's around there. It's kind of where the bottom of the ribcage goes up. And then we have the arrow of this going forward. Might be good to add a little bit more tilt, but for now that's fine. And then between the ribcage and the pelvis. Now here they're kind of overlapping, I think, because of the angle. So I'd imagine the same thing to be true for the pelvis and the ribcage. So I'm going to draw it a little bit closer than usual. And in this backwards tilt. That looks good to me. And the arrow that goes through pointing backwards. Then we have the front of the body. We have the cervical, thoracic, and the lumbar. It looks alright. I think the perspective is a bit off. Shouldn't be tilting quite so much. This is kind of like more of a side view. So let me just delete that and I'll try again. So since I realized I made a mistake, I'm just going to try and do it again, but this time adjust it so that the mistake's not as big. So we have the circle of the head, front of the face, bottom of the jaw connects to the head again. We have the clavicle, gives us the top of the rib cage. Then we have this center line of the torso. So we can use that to get the tilt of the ribcage. And it's something like that. I think that's alright. Split in half, 2/3. And so there's not much space here. Again, we're going to use that to find the top of the pelvis. And then we have the center line of the pelvis here. that's okay. Okay, so we've got head, rib cage, pelvis, connected by cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. And that looks all right to me. And based on my knowledge, looks a bit stylized, like the rib cage is probably too big and the pelvis too small in comparison, and maybe the circle of the head is maybe a bit too small, but I think I'm going in the right direction. So let's just try to redraw that from imagination or from memory. So we've got the circle of the head, front of the face, bottom of the jaw, connecting to the head. It's coming down, and there's only a little bit of space between the bottom of the jaw and the clavicle from this particular angle. And now drawing the rib cage with a slight tilt forward, not a dramatic tilt like this, which is the side view, but just a smaller tilt because of the angle. And I think that's okay. So this line is representing the tilt. Cut it in half and 2/3. That gives us the opening at the bottom of the rib cage. Then mirroring this distance, we're going to use the same distance to find the top of the pelvis. And that looks okay to me. Maybe a bit more. I think that looks alright. So this is the tilt that we've got. Then it's connected, cervical, and I forgot to draw the center line. Got the thoracic and the lumbar. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's see how it lines up with the reference. So my one's quite stretched out again, which is the same thing that we had with the girl. So just try and pinch it to get it to line up with the reference a bit better. So in this one, looks like I can probably push the pelvis up and make it a bit bigger. And likewise, or in the opposite direction, bring the ribcage a bit down and also increase the size. So from this angle, it seems like the egg of the ribcage and the pelvis, which normally have this separating distance, from this angle, the 3/4, they seem to overlap a lot more. Same with the head. But apart from that, I'm pretty happy with that. Let me just quickly erase this. Let's find another reference from a different angle. This one will do. So I'll try to get that proportion a bit better. It's something that I'm making a mistake on. Start with tracing this, the circle of the head, front of the face, bottom of the chin, and I'm just imagining the bottom of the chin to be here. Could be a bit off, but that's okay. Top of the clavicle gives us the top of the rib cage, and from this angle it seems like this, you can't see the tilt that much. It is there, maybe like that, but it's pretty subtle. Am I okay with that? Yeah. So that's the angle of the rib cage. Split it in half, and the opening I'll represent like that. Or should I do it like this? Do the center line of the back here, or the imagined center line of the rib cage. Then, so again, I don't even know if there's any distance here between the bottom of the jaw and the clavicle. They're pretty much on the same level. And I forgot to draw this connection of the jaw. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Basically just do them overlapping. So top of the pelvis, opposing tilt with the pelvis to the rib cage. I'm okay with that. It's a bit wonky, but that's fine. Backwards tilt. So we have the cervical again. Thoracic following the middle of the center point of the rib cage, and then lumbar. And from this angle, actually the lumbar starts a bit higher. The lumbar, thoracic, cervical, head. It's a nice circle. Rib cage, pelvis, front of the body makes this bean or sausage shape. Without it, this is what it looks like. So let's try to draw that again from memory. Just keeping the basic principles. circle of the head, front of the face, bottom of the jaw, connection of the jaw to the head, clavicle touching the jaw at this angle, gives us top of the rib cage, slight tilt, slight forwards tilt of the rib cage. That looks good to me. Cut it in half, thirds, and we have the opening of the rib cage in the front, and we'll just draw the center of the back here. Then on the same line from this angle, we're going to do the pelvis in a backwards tilt, so it's opposing. That looks good. Going back. Connections, cervical, from the head to the rib cage, thoracic, down the back of the rib cage, lumbar, from this angle slightly higher, comes and opposes, creating a balance. The front of the body, and we'll compare it to the reference. So it looks like proportions are a bit off, and from this angle I also neglected that the straight of the clavicle would be leaning in this direction, so that's okay. The clavicle should be a bit higher for this particular model, as well as the top of this rib cage. Thoracic's fine, and pelvis could actually be a bit higher as well and bigger. Which means that the rib cage would be a bit smaller. So perhaps my idea of the proportion of the rib cage to the pelvis is a bit off, and that they're closer in size than I thought they were. I think this is the correct proportion, roughly. What did I have? This, yeah, so quite different. This is roughly half the size of this, whereas it should be closer to 1 whole and 2/3. So 1 whole, 2/3. And then we have the head, which is 1/3. So I think I've got a decent handle on this. I'm going to move on. What other lessons did we go over? Wrapping lines. Okay, so let's just quickly do some wrapping lines on this reference. So this is the cylinder of the arm here, and it's going back in space, meaning it's going this way. Which means that the curves that are wrapping the form need to follow this direction towards the arrow. And we can see that in the reference with these pieces of armor, where it's doing exactly that. So let's do this arm now. And this would go like this, I guess. So it's going this way, I believe, which would mean that the wrapping lines move in this direction. And they progressively go from very C shaped to a more subtle C as they get here. Okay. And on the leg as well. It's moving this direction, meaning the lines need to be moving like this. And for the other leg, we can do the opposite to create a sense of balance. Is it the same way or is that a different way? I don't remember. So in this way, these two objects, oh, I did this wrong. So the arrow should be going out this way. They're moving in different directions. And for this arm, moving this direction, wrapping lines also go in this direction. And this gives us a sense of form and perspective. Okay, let's move on. Maybe let's apply that to one more reference. Just pick a random one. want a different pose. This one. Opacity to half. Okay. So we've got this arm going this direction. The arrow goes like this. And that's wrong. Okay, I'm a little bit confused about why this is the way it is. Because I thought that if it was moving in this direction towards the viewer, it would be roughly like this, but it's not. So maybe there's a little bit of lack of understanding here. Arrows going this way. For the leg. For both of these forms and do them opposing. And I can delete this. So if I draw it like this, it looks like they're overlapping. And they have a sense of balance. Now I don't understand why these arms are any different. Okay, so anyway, seems to be some sort of a gap in my understanding here, but we're just going to move on. Okay, so he's just saying here that most of everything in the pose can be explained if you understand what the spine is doing. Okay. Center of gravity. After developing your figure's pose as a gesture drawing, you will give a more concrete description of the major masses, the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis. Manipulating the figure's center of gravity in an exaggerated manner is essential in creating an interesting pose. So this is the center of gravity. And all the different limbs need to balance along this line. So we can see how it's balanced here. The goal of using the center of gravity is to force an awareness of how the figure is balanced. You can design a 2D lean for the rib cage that is off the symmetrical center. Of course, unless the figure is in a seated position, a pose using an object to remain upright, or if the majority of weight rests on the arms. common mistake when drawing the figure is keeping these shapes balanced and straight. Center drawing. Notice that the shapes of the major masses all have an equal and balanced relationship to the center of gravity. Okay, let's try and get some reference where the model is off center of gravity. We'll try and get some non-nude references. This one might be good. This one should be good. So these references that I have, I bought as part of a pack. It's called Flipbox, and the website is called Flipped Normals, if anyone is interested. Okay, so let's just try and find a rough center of gravity. I think it's around here, and then we'll see where the head, the rib cage, and the pelvis are sitting in relation to that. So we've got the head here, the rib cage, so the clavicle, it's close enough, and the pelvis overlapping with the ribcage in this perspective. And actually I'll change the ribcage . That's all right. The pelvis. Half, thirds. So this is the front of the rib cage. And they're also balanced out with the arms. So even though all these parts aren't sitting along the center of gravity, shown by the vertical line, even though everything else is in balance, she can stay upright. So maybe I'll try and do the same. So I tried not to look at the reference on the side and just did it from imagination. It's not meant to be that accurate. Just trying to get a general idea of the balance. It's not bad. Let's have a look at another reference. Okay, this one. Center of gravity is here, right where the heel is. Head is here, front of the face, bottom of the jaw connects to the head, the clavicle, now the rib cage is not really leaning. I guess it's slightly leaning forward, but it's very subtle. Okay, so using our rule, half, 2/3 gives us the top of this opening. Pelvis slightly leaning backwards, although not dramatically. It's close enough. So the lean of the rib cage. And the pelvis. Cervical connector. The thoracic. and the lumbar. Gravity balanced by the limbs. So, actually I think I got the center of gravity for this one wrong. I think it's a little bit closer to the front of the foot. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I think that makes more sense. And actually it might just be the middle of the foot, I think is more accurate. Which makes sense, we balance from the middle of our foot, not the end. And it lines up perfectly with the edge of the arm and the edge of the leg. As well as the edge of the head. And the edge of the rib cage, and pretty much the middle of the pelvis. So I think the pelvis seems to have less room to move from the center of gravity, and as we get closer to the head you can go further from the center of gravity, but because we need to be balanced from our feet, the pelvis has to stay pretty much aligned. Let's try and draw something similar. So for the center of gravity, the head slightly off center of gravity, front of the face, bottom of the chin, connecting the jaw to the head. Cervical, clavicle, rib cage, cut the rib cage in half, and then 2/3 front of the rib cage. And this is the center line. And the back center line. Then we've got the pelvis. Oh, actually, I need the ribcage to be touching this line, so it's not off balance. Okay, it's pretty good. Center line, half, 2/3 is here. Opening of the rib cage. And then the pelvis, pretty close to the center. I think the ribcage is coming out a bit too much. Okay, let's connect the spine, cervical, thoracic, and the lumbar. Which direction is the ribcage pointing? It's pointing this way, and the pelvis the opposing way. And this pelvis is a bit too much of a bit too much of a tilt, I think. So we have the armpit here, which is lining up there, and the bottom of the leg. And I forgot what the original pose looked like, but let's do something like this. It was hitting the middle of the foot, wasn't it? So I don't remember what the original pose looked like, but I think that's somewhat on balance. Yeah, it's pretty good. Good stuff. How are we doing for time? It's been 2.5 hours with a probably half an hour break. Looks like stream connection's not very good. That's okay. So I'll probably go until 7 p.m. and then call it, and then do a little bit of review, but I'll probably do the review off camera, just so I can relax. So we got another 15 minutes or so, and you can see on the side here I've written this art practice plan. It's mostly this part of how I'm tackling these problems and what kind of process I'm using to retain information. So basically I read the theory here, I try to imitate it, see what parts I'm retaining, and I can see that because of how I draw it. And comparing it back to the original. If my drawing is very different from the original, then I need to change it. So just drawing this stuff and imitating is fine, but we actually need to apply it practically, which is why I have these references where I can apply what I've learned to actual real life scenarios, and then review those, review that application so that I can adjust and see if I'm making any mistakes along the way. And then after that is just getting different angles. So it's all well and good to be able to draw this pose in this specific angle, but I need to be able to draw it in all angles, or at least a lot of different angles. And then the next step after that is doing different angles from imagination, using the frameworks that we're learning from in the book, and applying it consistently from imagination. And then the next step is just moving on to the next theory. And in art, there's an endless amount to learn from. So I've got an idea of the center of gravity and how that works. Next is ribcage and pelvis, according to Hampton. After identifying the center of gravity, the next step is to lay in the three major masses: the head, the ribcage, and the pelvis. Because the head is a more complex form addressed in a later chapter, for now keep it as a simple sphere shape. When placing the shapes of the ribcage and the pelvis, make sure they are consistent with the spine and the balance of the gesture. Before describing the shape of the pelvis or ribcage, look for the line of its tilt. An easy way to find this is to look for the weight-bearing leg. When the majority of weight is positioned on one leg, it usually causes this large area of bone to raise, dropping the other side. So let's try and find that. Okay, it's there, but I need a better picture. Okay, this one. So what he's talking about is when weight is bearing on one specific leg, usually it makes one side of the leg go upwards and the other side goes down. So basically it causes this tilt of the body, rather than something that's just straight down like this. So is he saying that that helps you find the angle of the ribcage? So draw this line of tilt and then position the shape on top. So this is the line of the tilt that he's talking about. And I guess you can see it with the tilt of the clavicle. And that's on the wrong layer. So you can see it in the weight-bearing leg. It creates this box. and you can also see it in the tilt of the clavicle. So then after you have these lines, and I think it's a bit off down here. Still a bit off. After you have this tilt, then you can draw the shape of the pelvis on top. It's basically what he's saying. And this just helps you place it better. Half, third, when I draw the circle, I should be getting the back of the head, the back of the skull. It's basically the whole point. So I need to not forget that. Okay, and he's described the forms of the ribcage and the pelvis in a few different ways. So we'll try and copy that. So ribcage first basically starts as an egg shape. Line down the middle as the center line. If we're looking straight on, then it's straight. If we're looking from the side, then it's curved. Then we have our own method of finding the opening at the bottom. Basically cut it in half, then thirds, and then 2/3 should make up the bottom of the rib cage. And I mean, I don't really think there's much point drawing it front on, but why not? So I think generally when you're trying to do stuff like this, learn the forms, learn the shapes, proportions, it's kind of better to do everything from the 3/4 view straight away rather than the front on view. Just because if you can do it in the 3/4 view, you can do it in the front view. But the opposite isn't always true. And the 3/4 view just shows a lot more about the form of what you're drawing, whereas the front on view just kind of looks like two-dimensional. And you can also do it from a bottom or top view. So for example, this cylinder, we see the bottom of it as it comes towards us in space. But if I just do a cylinder straight on like this, it's kind of just a bit boring and doesn't show much about the form of this object. he also does the ribcage as a box. And the pelvis is a bit more interesting. He kind of does like a dome shape, upside down dome shape. I guess I can do it like this. So it kind of looks like a pair of underpants. And then I'm not sure what this shape is supposed to be representing. But he also adds that. And he also does the pelvis as a box sometimes. And again, this weird shape in front. I don't know what that's supposed to be. And he also does it as a cylinder. And again with this shape in the front. So it's kind of like either straight or round or curved on this bottom line, and then two curves going up and in on the sides. So let's see what he says. At this early stage in the drawing, use the egg shape, which can then be used to develop more complex forms. So for our purposes, the egg shape is going to be the most useful. Just to see, we'll try and show some of these other ways of drawing the pelvis and the ribcage on this model. So I like the underpants one. I think it's quite intuitive for the pelvis. So basically you just start by drawing an ellipse, and it has to be consistent with perspective. So in this perspective it's quite a narrow ellipse. And let's actually use his trick of finding the weight bearing leg and the tilt of it to find the tilt of the pelvis like that, and then we can do this shape on top. So start with an ellipse, then two circles for the sides where the legs connect, or two ellipses rather, and then actually they take up the whole space of the side. Or rather, might be a good idea to drill the bottom, the pubic bone, first. And it's quite narrow, maybe about half of the width of this. And then the connectors, or connector holes, I guess. So we get this underpants shape, and then you just clean it up. This weird shape in the front. again, I don't know what this is for. And there we have some legs and the pelvis. Let's get some more reference. And we'll try and put the rib cage in a box. So maybe this one. And this will be our last one that we do for today. So I'll start with the head. Just as a sphere, we get the back of the skull and this front of the forehead. Not quite. It's close enough. Front of the face, down to the chin, and then box of the jaw. Then we have tilt of the clavicle and tilt of the leg. It gives us the tilt of the pelvis and tilt of the rib cage. So they're pretty aligned in this. Is that true? I don't know if that's true. That's like that. And I think the pelvis is kind of in that tilt. So perpendicular to that is like this. We're doing a box, aren't we? And so it's from the front of the box, then the side of the box, okay, so this is a bit harder because we have to put it in perspective, and that's difficult. Whereas the egg, you don't have to be as specific. So that's the bottom of the box in the shaded area. And I just want to erase it a little bit so I have room for the pelvis. And we're going to do the underpants shape. So I'm going to do top of the pelvis, roughly here. And it's pretty perfectly connecting with the rib cage from this perspective anyway. I get the pubic bone. And then the sides. So it looks like my one's a little bit high. Let me push this down. then I'll have room for the leg openings. And then there's the weird shape in the front, which is somewhat like this. And need to adjust this a bit.